are all on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, and prosperity and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. It is, in fact, our 12th Global View on Q for 2024, and we are certainly going to have a great conversation tonight with you, our Q family listeners and friends of Dominica worldwide on our live radio, as I said, at www.q95da.com, on Facebook, YouTube, Q95 FM radio. And for our distinguished guests, Dr. Irving Andre, Mr. Simeon Joseph, and Dr. Thomson Fontaine. A very, very warm welcome to all distinguished gentlemen, all illustrious sons of the soil. Good evening to you all, gentlemen. Tonight, it's all about the state of progress in securing reform of Dominica's electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations. We heard the latest today from a press con from the Prime Minister indicating that it'll be the second week in April is the new deadline date for revealing the elements of the electoral reform that he plans to take to Parliament for approval. So we will have a say on that tonight because this is quite some time after the first date, the first promise was made to bring these laws to the public before going to Parliament and before, in fact, giving them to the Electoral Commission as well. So we're going to focus ourselves tonight on the state of governance in Dominica, the state of Dominica's economy in light of the most recent IMF report on the situation in Dominica's economy. In terms of the state of governance, we know for a fact that one judge has said something about it, Judge Williams. He certainly had something to say about it, the state of our justice system, and I believe the president of the CCJ also had something to say about the prime ministerial democracies versus parliamentary democracies. I personally will have something to say about that later on. So I will, in fact, outline a few talking points or starters, but I will leave the substantive details of these and the rest of the talking points to you, my learned colleagues on the panel tonight, and you all callers and viewers. The government appears to be acknowledging now that the perception that there is insufficient money in the public purse and public expenses have to be reduced. However, the DLP regime did exactly the opposite of that over the past several years. The DLP regime also said economic growth had to be driven by public sector investments as the engine of growth, and in fact sidelined the private sector, which is known to be the real engine of growth. But where is Mr. Hayden getting all this money to build multi-story buildings in Dubai? Does any Dominican have taken any apartments overseas? Or any of these apartments as well? Where did Dominica's money go over the past 24 years? How long will we be taken for a ride? How long will we stand idly while our greenery is looted under our very eyes? How long will we be bludgeoned into poverty while the sellers of our passport build the luxury buildings in Dominica and Dubai? Are we not talked enough? What are we doing to take back our money? Are we not real men and women? How much has to be stolen before Dominicans stop the theft of their national possessions? And according to the great Bob Marley, when will we chase them crazy ballheads out of town? So on our panel tonight, Dr. Andre, as you know, is one of Dominica's greatest advocates and is knowledgeable about reforms that have taken place throughout the Caribbean region. He will examine, I'm sure, the recommendations of Justice Williams as regards Dominica's justice system and the proliferation of cases that have been just there languishing, and particularly those of the persecution of opposition leaders who have been waiting 7 years for their case to be heard, but absolutely no evidence, and therefore they're just languishing. Their case keeps being postponed. Isn't it time that this case be nulliprossed, or that there be some move to dismiss those cases for want of prosecution? Mr. Simeon Joseph is a deep-thinking social scientist who understands the problems in our public sector and the society at large, and the actions that need to be applied to solve them. I hope he will share some of that, his knowledge and wisdom and experience in the public service with us tonight. help us with some solution. Dr. Thomson Fontaine, as you know, is a former IMF financial economist and the leader of the UWP, the largest opposition party in Dominica. He understands what drives the private sector as the real engine of growth in Dominica. And the true meaning and implications of what is the most recent IMF report on Dominica's economy and what needs to be done to get it back on track. I'm sure Dr. Fontaine will assist us with that as well. But tonight, our panel and you, our cherished listeners and viewers, will suggest what we all must do together to secure real reformed electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations in the quickest possible time in order to put good governance in place and turn around the fortunes of Dominicans and Dominica by extension. I really do not have a lot of hope that what we might hear by the second week of April may be what is fully in the best interest of all of those groups in Dominica that put forward their proposals for reforms. And I'm not sure how closely this will fit with what the government might present, but we shall see. But tonight we will definitely delve into the period from 2000 to 2024, when this regime came into office and is still in office, and to see how many billions of dollars have passed through the hands of this DLP regime in office, from the many sources that have delivered the most money to any government in Dominica ever. What have they done with it? What has been done with all that money? Can anyone see what that money did for poor struggling Dominicans when you look around you, look at our lifestyles in Dominica? Why is the cost of everything still so high? Why are so many people not working? Why is the healthcare still so poor that so many Dominicans are apparently afraid to go to their own hospital for fear that they may not come out alive? We will look forward to concrete suggestions as to forward actions that patriots may wish to consider and how they can play a meaningful role in securing appropriate reform of the electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations to secure our much needed free and fair elections. So tonight, I trust that my distinguished guests will make suggestions as to where Dominica should go from here to see native Dominicans prosper, rather than continue to see more land grabbing by foreign nationals, millions of dollars being sent out by foreign contractors and workers, while Dominican entrepreneurs and our very talented youth are displaced and are still losing their heritage as they stand aside and look at money simply passing them by and going away. We will examine why it is imperative that we embrace national unity again, all hands on the same deck, as was done by the Granby people 50 years ago, as was done in 1979 by all sectors in Dominica, to secure good, caring governance in our nature isle, enable us to make ourselves truly economically independent in a democratic environment, as we see Dominicans now feeling a really terrific pinch, a really great pinch, painful pinch in their pockets. My distinguished guests, Dr. Irving, Mr. Simeon Joseph, and Dr. Thomson Fontaine, you, our cherished listeners, viewers, and callers from at home in Dominica, in the region, and globally, will call and help us expand and broaden the dialogue and opine on the merits and demerits of what we are witnessing in Dominica today in comparison to what transpired some years ago in Dominica as a whole, and as we can see in our sister Caribbean territories around us. They're doing so much better than we are at this time. So we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to stay with us on the radio, on television, on frequencies in Dominica, on our internet, on our Facebook and YouTube, and have your say as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, on the Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station. So, our usual, and a huge shout out, hugs and love and appreciation. A big thank you to our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, public and private sector patriots at home and abroad. We welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, in every nook and cranny, in every village, every community at home in Dominica, in the region and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, again for keeping us on the air tonight. And tonight, thank you, Bosso, for being on the console. Lambi is not able to be here with us tonight. Lambi is not well, and we wish him all the best. We wish him a very, very speedy recovery Sorry we could not have you here with us, Lami, tonight. Wherever you are, if you're able to listen, we're reaching out to you to say hello and to wish you well, a very speedy recovery. So we will take your calls a bit later. The people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. Call us anytime during the program, and Bosso will take your calls. He will signal us whenever you call, and we will certainly take your call. So let's get started. And I go first to Dr. Irving Andre for the first word in his brief 5-minute opening remarks to get the ball rolling on our conversation tonight. Our other panelists will do the same thereafter, and then we'll all have a great Dominican family conversation and engagement, and hopefully learn lessons from our extraordinary past accomplishments with a focus on the state of progress in securing reform Dominica's electoral campaign finance laws and regulations, the state of governance in Dominica, the state of Dominica's economy in light of the most recent IMF report on the situation in our economy, the recommendations of Justice Williams as regards Dominica's justice system, and the statement the president of the CCJ on prime ministerial democracies compared to parliamentary democracies. This will hopefully inspire all of us to translate our great historic, economic, political, social, and cultural experience into taking some meaningful actions now for the future prosperity of all of our beloved people, our communities, our whole London Dominica as a whole, and set the path to a more meaningful future for our upcoming younger generation. So I now circle back to you, Dr. Andre, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. G. Let me say it's good to be on the panel with Dr. Fontaine and Mr. Joseph and the venerable Bosso, the veteran who made a great showing on Sunday. I listened and I was very impressed as usual. And obviously, good night to all patriots and all listeners. This is obviously not a time to celebrate. I'm just going to make some opening remarks with respect to electoral reform. Let me invite those who had this wonderful meeting between that meeting on Sunday, to get ready to have an even more massive meeting, either immediately before or after the second week in April, when we're told Parliament will be discussing or dealing with the whole issue of electoral reform. We do not expect anything substantive, anything good about what is being proposed. What makes you think, let me ask our dear listeners, what makes you think for 1 minute that those who feared that true electoral reform would damage their winning legacy, that those who've run roughshod over the electoral laws over the last 3 or 4 electoral cycles, that those who do have no belief or desire for true campaign finance reform, that those who believe that voters can come from anywhere around the globe and vote in any strategic constituency to ensure the winning legacy of the directorate. What make you think for 1 minute that you're going to get electoral reform in April? Electoral reform lies within the collective strength of Dominicans who hopefully have seen the light or are seeing the light, who hopefully have been inspired by the need for unity, to fight for unity and to fight for true electoral reform. What makes you think that those folks have any belief, any reason to want it? Do you think that they're reborn? Do you think that they've been reborn on the road to Damascus? That they got up 2 nights ago and said, you know, we were wrong. We should have elections which mean something. We should follow the example of Antigua, for example. It will not happen. What makes you think that it will happen? So let us confront the inconvenient truth. True electoral reform lies in the collective strength and unity of those who seek a proper functioning democracy. I'll have more to say about that. What about the criminal justice system? It hurts. All we can say is, bon Dieu, Saint Mary Joseph. The justice is not saying anything that we haven't heard before. We've heard all that. But it resonates more when a foreigner has to come and tell us what we've been saying all along. The system is dysfunctional. The magistracy has been contaminated by the political process, and for good reason. The justice talks about the length of the number of remands, persons who have not been tried but who are in custody. He's also hinted at the amount of time it takes for a simple matter to come to trial. But we know 7 years they charge a charge without any evidentiary foundation, mind you, hanging over your heads or the heads of political opponents. The only mystery to me is why has that not been challenged, particularly in the case where your constitution says everyone should be guaranteed a trial within a reasonable time. Why has that not been challenged? I don't know why. Courts are increasingly embarrassed by that stain on the criminal justice system. Because to have these charges over people who are presumed to be innocent, mind you, is to tantamount to having them drag across along the roads of Roseau, because this is wrong by any type of measure. Any independent person, whether in the justice system or otherwise, will instinctively know that this is fundamentally wrong. It should not be allowed to continue. It will not happen in any of the other islands in the Eastern Caribbean. The system is broken, it's contaminated, blatantly so, and it is time that this thing is addressed. What about the IMF? I'm not going to say too much about it. Thomson Fontaine is a big expert. But the IMF report has just shown why so many countries, particularly third world countries, want nothing to do with the IMF. It's an embarrassment. The IMF doesn't measure the misery index. It doesn't measure the corruption index. It doesn't measure the foreign ownership index. It doesn't measure the unjust enrichment index. I mean, look at their proposals for in terms of spending reform. One, a decline in wage bill should continue. But hold on. Didn't this electorate give themselves 30 to 50% increases in wages? And you are telling us that the decline in public wage should continue. Decline for who? Hear what they're saying again. Civil service reform. What does that mean? Is that compatible with persons who on a daily basis are going to various government ministries, police forces, etc., and saying, my pal rep sent me? That is the civil, you're talking about civil service reform, but you're not addressing the reality, because the reality is a negation of all that crap that is being proposed by the IMF. They're talking about increase in water and sewage rates. Dominicans are struggling with payment of utilities, whether it's electricity, water, whatever it is, phone bills and all these kinds of things. But the IMF think that a good remedy for Dominica would be increase in the water and sewage rates, a country where we boast of having how many rivers? 365. Payment for medical services, but hold on. The IMF is talking about payment, having the population pay for medical services. First of all, the political directorate, when they need such medical services, it's not that they don't pay, they fly away to Zion to get medical treatment. There are persons who cannot afford what is being suggested that they should pay at the hospital. The hospital itself is asking people to bring your own toilet paper, bring your own sanitary napkins, bring your own food, bring your own linen. And these folks are telling that one way to curb spending is to having people pay for medical services. But hear this finally, the final insult. The NEP should be reassessed. Did you say reassessed? But you were asking for the government to reduce the wage bill So when you say the NEP should be reassessed, you mean the little $800 a month you are paying to these folk, some of whom you haven't paid for months, you are in effect telling the government, Gaso, you should reduce their wages even more at a time when you are taking 30 to 50% increase. So the IMF, quite frankly, is an organization which has come up with a prescription for persistent poverty in Dominica. Nothing more, nothing less. I think these are my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andre. There's so much to digest here, and so much of that we're going to discuss in a little bit more detail later as we go along. Because you've ended your brief opening remarks on the IMF. Let me just go immediately to Dr. Fontaine to give us his opening remarks on that, because certainly we're going to have a lot to say about the IMF tonight. Dr. Fontaine, you're muted. I think you need to unmute your mic.
Yes, I do. All right, wonderful. Let me say a very special good evening to all of you, Mr. G, Simeon, Dr. Andre, Bosso on the consoles, and of course to all of the Dominicans who are listening. A very special good night to all of you. And certainly we have a lot to talk about tonight. No less, one of the important discussions is the IMF report. But let us bear in mind that typically, the information that the IMF reports comes from the authorities. They visit the country, they talk to the authorities. The data they get comes from the authorities, and a lot of the information that they get comes from the authorities. So one of the things that I try to do is to separate what the authorities, what the government is telling them, and what they themselves are infusing into the conversation. And you'll find very often a lot of what is written in that report actually emanates from the countries itself. All right, the authorities. I mean, that is something I did for many years. Those same kind of missions in different countries across the globe, and that's what we do. We engage the local authorities, discuss with them. We look at the budget numbers. We look at the spending, we look at the revenues, we look at the sources, and we try to understand. Because bear in mind, this is not a program. This is just what is called an Article 4 consultation, which is once you become a member of the IMF, you agree that they will from time to time come to your country and look at the state of your finances, look at your balance of payments, look at your revenues, look at your expenses, and then try to help to see what is going on. Now, when there is a program, when you have a program with the IMF, which means you're actively borrowing from them, then it is a little bit different in the sense that now they begin to prescribe remedies that you have to follow. Okay, but that's not the case here. Here they may make suggestions to the country, but it is not binding. So I just wanted to be very clear on this. And so when you see issues like, increasing the water rates or taking the electricity rates, and so on, removing the reimposing rather the value added tax on DOMLEC, on electricity rates, that probably is coming from the government in the sense that is what they're saying, that they will try to raise the revenues. Now, why is the government in such a desperate situation? It is in such a desperate situation because its CBI revenues are falling like a stone. The CBI revenues projected to fall. It was, according to the latest report, it was roughly $650 million in 2022, and it's now $354 million in 2023. That is a huge drop, and one that is likely to continue going forward. In other words, we very well might have begun to see the demise of the CBI program, given what has happened with the imposition of visas by the United Kingdom, and now the European Union looking to impose visa restrictions on Dominica, we very well might be witnessing the end of the CBI revenues as we know it. Now, I was just making a quick count and trying to see the several billions of dollars by the government's own reckoning. Several billions of dollars came in. I mean, just for the 2 years, for example, looking at 2022 and 2023, that is over $1 billion in just 2 years. That actually came in through the consolidated front. We are not considering the billions of dollars that is still outside with persons like Anthony Hayden, who have been given carte blanche to hold on to a significant portion of the CBI revenues. These are revenues that come in otherwise because we have two aspects of the CBI program: the 100,000 contribution for a passport and the 200,000 where you buy into a property. Now, Hayden was controlling that aspect of it. The real estate aspect of it was controlled by Hayden. So a significant amount of monies were being channeled through that. That has not come in through the consolidated fund of Dominica. It has not come in through it. But even with what has come in, that has been a huge amount of money. But what have we seen? We've not seen the government do anything, for example, to increase the salaries of the public servants. And now, to the contrary, they're talking about reducing the wage bill, as Dr. Andre pointed out, reducing the wage bill, looking at the NEP program, probably speak for it is time to get rid of this program, because they were very clear to say that the NEP has reached it has gone beyond what it was intended to accomplish. And so it is something that the government has to try to remove or reduce or reorganize. So all of those measures there are coming as a direct result of where we are now with this huge decline in revenues. Now, why is that important? If you consider, for example, that when we had a major shift in Dominica's economy in the early 1990s with the loss of the banana export, bear in mind, when we lost the banana export, these were all revenues coming into individuals, all right? The majority of the monies coming into Dominica at that time was money coming to individuals. It was not, because the banana industry was hardly taxed. Farmers were not paying taxes, except probably when they went to buy goods and services, they would pay a value-added tax or sales tax or something. But that is different now. You're talking about monies that are coming directly into the government that is used to pay for goods and services. So it makes it extremely more difficult. It makes the impact probably 10, 15, 20 times more disastrous. It will be more greatly felt, because now you're talking about the government's ability to continue to service the hospital, to continue to service the education, to buy chalkboards, to buy different school supplies and so on. You're talking about its ability to service its $300 program that it does for the elderly, to do the NEP. So it's a tremendous shock that we are witnessing there on the Dominican economy. And the question is, how is government going to deal with it? So I think if I would say anything added to this particular aspect of it, is to tell Dominicans to tighten their waist, because difficult times are ahead. It's going to be extremely difficult. You will witness increase in taxes, because that's one way government is going to try to offset that huge shock. They're going to try to increase taxes, and they're going to try to reduce their wage bills. And they're going to try to reduce the service bill. So persons who, for example, have been waiting to be paid their LPOs, they probably have to wait a lot longer, because the government simply will not have the monies to pay it. So we are in for a very difficult time in Dominica. That's one. The second thing I would like to talk just very briefly before I make way for the other speakers and to continue our discussion is what I think is extremely hurtful to me. The fact that this government in 2024 is not given any kind of work to our local contractors. I'm seeing the schools being built in Calabishi, schools been built in Goodwill in Pottersville area, and all of that is being done by Chinese contractors. So that tells me that the government of Dominica does not believe that the people of Dominica can build their own country, can build the buildings as they've done in the past. All of the buildings in Dominica, um, up to right before probably the last couple of years, were built by Dominican contractors. Locals were given jobs on those projects, and our money was being used to develop Dominica and to develop Dominicans. And the pride of place that local contractors had, all of that is gone. This government sees absolutely no value in our buildings, and I'm very troubled by this. It is painful to think that the government is using Dominica's money, using taxpayer money or monies for the CBI program, does not see it fit to employ local contractors to construct school buildings, apartment buildings. This is an utter disgrace, and this is something that the people of Dominica should be making more noise about. I cannot believe that we're sitting quietly by and allowing this government to continue to disrespect our people, to continue to downplay the skills and the potential of our Dominicans that have so much to offer, and not give them a place to be able to contribute to the development of our country in a way that they are used to doing. This is hurtful, this is painful, and this is something that the government of Dominica need to reverse. It needs to begin to put those contracts into the hands of local contractors. It needs to begin to do the movement of whether it's aggregate or sand or tarish, whatever it is, into the hands of the local truckers. We need to empower our people. We need to empower our Dominican people, our Dominican workers, our carpenters, our masons, our truckers. This needs to be done. And Dominica, it is time to take a stand. We talk about a lot of different things, but that is something I really want to put the focus on squarely, this continual dissing of the Dominican public by this government. And we need to stand up against it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Thomson, for your opening remarks here. And essentially, as I go to Simeon, I mean, Simeon, you have a lot of experience in the public service. You've seen the way the public service worked in better days, under better circumstances, in better times, in the banana days, just after that. And you've seen what is happening today. And you can see already, you're the kind of guy who's a kind of bridge from what was happening before to what is happening now. When you witness what has been happening over the last 20 years versus what really best practices in the public service, how does that make you feel? I mean, what do you think about what you've witnessed happening there? You're muted. You need to unmute, yeah.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Gregoire. Good evening, Thomson. Good evening, Dr. Andre, and of course, Bosso. So it's amazing after coming after Dr. Andre and his overview of what I would consider his own social reality, and Dr. Fontaine from his perspective. I'm just mindful of, if I were to answer your question, just in a circumventing way, so to speak, because that's a very wide discussion to have. First of all, I will answer how I feel by pivoting to the Dominican people in a while. So listening to what the conversation that has been held before, we hear words like electoral reform, we hear words of political organization. I heard the word democracy. I heard the word governance, economics, justice, social issues, and cultural issues. I think there is one word that comes to mind as the fulcrum. In physics, you have the fulcrum, okay? Anybody who has done, the role of the fulcrum in physics. I think there's one word that comes to mind, and that word is stability or instability, however you want to look at it. Stability or instability, because all those words that were mentioned earlier will direct our attention to where we are in Dominica, and especially in light of the fact that electoral reform seems to be now an elusive dream. I have come to the realization after listening to the government the past 2 months, we're not going to get electoral reform in Dominica. And that is where that's where governance comes in, because electoral reform is supposed to usher in a certain kind of hope of a process whereby the governed will resume responsibility and ownership for their governance. That's what electoral reform is going to do. It's not just going to change the landscape or the political landscape or the election landscape. To me, electoral reform is supposed to usher in a new opportunity where the governed, the people, the population, the populace, out of which the word politics comes from, will assume responsibility for their own governance. Now, as a precursor to this evening's program, we heard of the report and the IMF report, which has been discussed. And of course, we have heard the report of the judge. So the IMF report is an economics report. And the report from the judge, and mark it as the second one because there was one in December. Just December gone, there was the same judge who spoke at the end of the September assizes. It's a very scathing review on the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution and the lawyers in Dominica. And let's not forget, before that, Mr. Stephen Astafan, who was in Dominica for a short while, also had some scathing remarks for the judicial system in Dominica. What does that say? What does that say about justice? Huh? And when we listen to the IMF report, what does that say about the economics of the country? But these are just written reports. To me, this is where I'm going to answer your question. The greatest report in Dominica is not the state of our economy or the state of our legal system. The greatest report in Dominica is what is the state of the Dominican people? What is the state of our young people, our elderly? What is the state of our public servants? What is the state of our unemployed? What is the state of our farmers and our fishermen and our carpenters and our plumbers? What is the current state? What is the report that these people can now say about Dominica? And to my mind, I think that is why I said to me earlier on, the fulcrum in all of this discussion has to be stability. And so we have to think of what is our economic stability and what is our political stability. Two heavyweights upon which the development of any country rests. And so if, and Dr. Thomson is there, and I mean, the most I can share is my little A-level economics from from college, okay? Or my little economic that I did in political science. I cannot by any measure try to match up to his plate. So I can only go with my A-level or my politics and economics and politics trading, you know. But so it brings the question, if we have to discuss all of that tonight, the stability of the country, I'm sure he will agree with me, will rest on how stable or unstable economically a country is and how stable or unstable politically. And the two are intertwined. They are not divorced. They are not separate. Okay? And so if the economy refers to the wealth and the resources of a country, and it is dependent on the relationship between the basic of supply and demand. If economic stability supposed to occur when the economy is strong and inflation and unemployment rates are low, when consumer spending is supposed to be high, and there's an average increase in income and businesses are thriving, that's when you gauge whether a country has a certain level of economic stability. These are the ingredients for economic stability. Okay? Low inflation, low unemployment rates, high consumer spending, good income from the average citizen, and businesses are thriving. Let us reflect that. Let us impose that reality on Dominica and ask those questions. What's the inflation rate in Dominica? What is the unemployment rate in Dominica? Can people spend? Where do people have the power? Do our consumers have the power to spend? Are our people gaining adequate, reasonable, and sufficient income so they can live satisfied lives? What is the state of our local businesses in Dominica? So that's a question we have to ask. Then when it comes to measuring economic instability, we have to ask the question, how weak is our economy? How weak are our consumers? Are our consumers able to spend? And are our businesses suffering? These are the questions we have to ask in Dominica. What is the state of the business? Are our businesses in Dominica suffering? Are they strong? Are they thriving? Are they making a profit? Can people pay their bills on time and have extra cash? Does the average person have enough income in their pocket so they can pay their bills and buy the food and pay their utilities and live a life that is comfortable? Can we say that? And what is the state of our economy? Now, there's one question I think I would like Dr. Thomson to address tonight. And that is the massive construction of houses by the government. And I know from my following of information on economics, I know there's something called the housing bubble, where if you don't have enough houses in a country, it may lead to high prices. But if you have a preponderance of houses, okay, that could lead to a housing bubble. I hope he will clarify that later. So I want to relate that to what was all these houses that are being built in Dominica and being given free of charge to people. I think we need to analyze that tonight. As what is the impact on that on our economy in terms of the economic thing? So we have to look at that. And then what I would like us to also consider tonight, having spoken about our economic stability or instability, is our political instability. And what is the correlation between economic stability and instability, or economic and economic stability and instability, as to the level of harmful malaise that exists in our society today, and to what extent that we can say that the political instability that perhaps exists in Dominica today, how does that impede our economic growth as a country? And how quantitatively important are the effects of political instability on the main drivers of our growth, and namely our total factor of productivity and physical and human capital accumulation? These are questions that I would like to raise tonight as we speak, because in a nutshell, I could say in simple terms, can Dominica go anywhere? Based on the economic reality that we are in now and the political reality that we are in now. And that is why I asked the question, when you ask me how do I feel, how I feel goes back to how the Dominican people are. I feel for the Dominican people. I feel sad that public servants cannot make ends meet. I feel sad that the average young person doesn't seem to be able to see their way in Dominica. I feel sad that our nurses and our policemen and our firemen and our public servants are not able to see their way, that our teachers are basically scraping to make ends meet. I feel sad that our farmers do not have exports, that our farmers cannot see their way. That's how I feel. And really and truly, in the midst, as I said, of all the reports that there can be from wherever, I think the greatest report that we need to consider tonight is the report of the average Dominican citizen.
Yeah, well, thanks for those opening remarks. Very, very poignant, very dynamic opening remarks. The reason why I asked you, Simeon, how you feel is because I was hoping that you would, and you in fact did, express the way you feel, which I believe is a reflection of the way every ordinary person feels in Dominica, except a select few, right, who have many, many privileges. But I believe everything that you said tonight reflects the way the people, ordinary people in Dominica feel. When you talk about consumer confidence, for example, obviously there's how can you have consumer confidence and consumer spending if the income is not there, if people are not working, if the contractors that they idly buy their trucks not working and they have to pay whatever loans that they took to buy them. So I mean, I'm going to go to Dr. Andre first to go back to the whole question of instability, because you see, Simeon raised that question. That is something that affects everybody. If you have, and I know Dr. Thomson will come back with a lot of details that the questions that Simeon asked. I'm giving him the chance to put his thoughts together so he can come back and answer the questions that were posed by Simeon. But Dr. Andre, the whole question of political instability, economic instability, the correlation between the two, the question of how do people really feel? Do they feel that they have a future in Dominica, or do they feel that the future is really to escape, to go away, get a visa, go away? Take a job as a police officer or a nurse. As soon as you have that and you can get a visa, let's get out of there so that we have a profession which we can say, let me apply for a job overseas. So this question of political instability, isn't that a reflection of what the judges are telling us? Is illustrious judges what they say? These smart judges are telling us about our justice system. Why should people feel it's a stable situation? If you open your mouth and talk, they arrest you and then put you in there for 2 days, and then it takes 7 years to build a case. How can you feel confident in an environment where if you ask about your 6 or 7 or 8 billion dollars that's missing, people want to take you to court and tell you, look, or go to court and prove it, and then take 10 years to prove it in court while you're spending money on lawyers? Because we know the justice system, as the judges told us, is really broken. And all these cases are languishing for years. So what sense does it make trying to take these people to court and you cannot get a case for 7 years without any evidence? Back you, Dr. Andre.
Well, I hope the judge reflects, and his colleagues also, that they have a role to play in the proper functioning of the justice system. I hope they realize that if they don't play that role, they become complicit in what they complain about. We know that there are significant issues with the magistracy, but the problems are not limited to the magistracy. Bear in mind that not too long ago, we had a judge who laid like a fowl. Well, she was in Dominica for 13 years, which was very much in contravention of the policy that a judge should only be in a certain island for a limited number of years to avoid contamination, to avoid being infected with the virus of partiality. And under that judge, who was a known sympathizer of the political directorate, many cases became buried. Cases which did not have the privilege of Lazarus to be resurrected, because arguably that was part of the whole unsorry scheme of things. So that is basically where we are, but the justice system is just a symptom of a more general malaise. And you've talked about that in various programs. There's been a breakdown of all the vital organs of a proper functioning democracy, whether it's the IPO, whether it's the Electoral Commission, whether it's the Office of the General Auditor, you name it. They all have been affected by the same malady, and they haven't been resurrected by any type of medication. It is Dominicans who have to free themselves from this slowly encroaching, pit, a pit of mud. They are slowly being drowned because economically they're being starved. The government is talking about increasing the cost of services. They're talking about retrenchment in the public service, and I hope the public the public unions listen to this very carefully. Some of them, they have their heads in the sand. They're talking about retrenchment. We haven't heard anything about expanding opportunities for local businesses. We haven't heard anything for expanding opportunities for farmers. What we've heard, for example, the building of hotels at a time when the occupancy rate is perhaps less than 25%. But who's building it? Cronies, narcissists, those who are playing ball with the political directorate. So this is nothing to boast about. What is the occupancy rate of a hotel formerly known as Kempinski? You tell me. So what kind of wealth and income and employment are these institutions generating? How much money has been spent on this geothermal initiative? Hundreds of millions. What do we have to show for it? I heard even the labels in Portsmouth are complaining, are protesting. They will provide more light at a lower cost than all this expenditure for geothermal energy. So we have nothing to boast about. We have nothing to be happy about. If you are known or believed or suspected not to play ball with the political directorate, you and your relatives are victimized. Is any reference to any of that in any type of observation or report, whatever you want to call it, of the IMF? Of course not. They're not interested in these issues. They're interested, whether they know it or not, implicitly or explicitly, in painting a fine gloss over what we know is a living hell in Dominica, to a point where it's an open secret now that members of the judiciary, in terms of the rule of law, they know that Dominica is a basket case. That is the sad reality we have to contend with. That is why we have to be motivated by what Martin Luther King described as the fierce urgency of now. What are we doing now? What type of peaceful initiatives are we taking now to free ourselves from this sorry scheme of things entire? That is where we are. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Andrea. And just before I go to you, Dr. Fontaine, I just want to just raise this issue as we talk about instability and governance. I am kind of losing confidence in the system that we have now. And the judge, touched on it. I mean, this thing is not working. You have the legislative branch appointing judges, having a hand in appointment of judges, having a hand in financing the judicial system, having their hands in appointing magistrates and DPP and Attorney General and appointing presidents. What kind of system is that? When the framers of our Constitution, when they put the Constitution together, they assumed, one of the fundamental errors they made, they assumed that every single person who was going to be a prime minister or minister of government would be a gentleman, gentle lady, not a rogue or a vagabond. Not somebody who would have their personal interests only at stake and not that of the people. I don't think they thought about that at all. And that's the reason why, although we're supposed to have three branches of government, just separate and independent, we really don't effectively. Effectively we don't, because you have the legislative branch where the prime minister is in charge. In fact, the Constitution makes no provision to political parties. They don't tell political parties what to do, how to do your business. So a leader of a party who may be a rogue and a vagabond, but who has access to deep pockets, who pick sources of money, may come and say, all right, I'm going to select all the 21 candidates. I'm going to put money in their pockets so they can win, and let the people see a larger sum of money. And then so these people come to cabinet, and they're not really beholden to the constituents, they're beholden to the man who selected them and who gave them money. And so they win, I owe it to him. And then whatever this man says go to his cabinet. But then that cabinet controls the parliament because the eyes have it. So whatever the cabinet says becomes law. And the point is, and when you get to the judiciary, then it means that this police or the DPP or the AG, whoever is bringing those cases, I mean, they keep getting those cases, but oh, we couldn't make it today. Oh, the witness wasn't able. Oh, the documents are right. Oh, that person is sick. 7 years people are waiting. And this Judge Williams said, look at the number of the backlog of cases that we have. So I'm getting, I think we will come back to that a little later before, as I come to you, Thomson, because I believe we need to make a change in our system. I really believe we do. And I'm going to make some, I've made those recommendations on this program before. I will reiterate them tonight. But Thompson, let me go over to you because, you know, there's so much has been said by Simeon, by Dr. Andre, about the instability question, the question of the economics, the situation of our economy. You remember, and you have notes, you studied this thing when Dominica used to export what? Foreign earnings of what, 160, 180 million from bananas? I mean, and Dr. Andre made a point. I think Simeon made a point. This money was going straight to the farmers. But today, all these billions of dollars going to government. They do all kind of things, and we don't see what they're doing with it. They've never bothered to strengthen the pillars of the economy or the pillars of democracy. And so today, we're seeing the economy is failing, and this money is dwindling. So we did not bother to restructure agriculture or tourism or processing or manufacturing knowledge industries. These were the pillars, but now these pillars are weak. Structures are weak. So Thompson, let's get some of your thoughts on some of those, how this impact the instability, the political and economic instability of the country.
Yeah, this is something that we have to look at very, very closely because it really speaks to the heart of the problem and the issues we're having in Dominica. Uh, because this government has failed to develop the productive sectors of the economy, we have the issues that we're having. So they failed to invest in agriculture, for example. They failed to put the farmers on their feet. They failed to invest. I remember one time the government promised to have two boats, one from the north, one from the south. Empty promises. They've never revived the agriculture sector. They've never gone on any sustained replanting activity, whether to replant bananas or coconuts or nothing, or citrus. So they have not invested in agriculture. Um, for one thing, which is the mainstay of the economy. So if you're talking about stability, you're talking about pillars of the economy that can help sustain you so that in difficult times you are sustained. If those pillars are rotted or if those pillars are not solid, then the economy is wobbly. It increases the number of persons, for example, who now depend upon a handout from government. So now we have a number of persons who at one time were productive in society, who would be employed within the agriculture sector or within the construction sector. These individuals now find themselves depending upon the governmental largesse. Now it is okay when where there is government has, but as we are coming into a situation where that is all going away, then you're going to have more instability. You're going to have more problem because those pillars have not been established. You know, one of the things that we kept saying over and over and over again that this government should have done with all of these billions of dollars that was coming into the country over the last 15, 20 years was that these money should have gone into something sustainable. So by now, we should have built up a strong manufacturing sector based on our agriculture. We should have built up a very strong agriculture sector. We should have built up a very strong tourism product and sector. We should have built up a very strong services sector. So all of those areas, we should have been able to put money from the CBI program into those that would make it sustainable. By that I mean something that could last, something that would create jobs, would keep making money. So over time, it supports itself. Because, for example, if you have a factory, and for our listeners, it's as simple as this: if you are working in a factory that is selling goods, so let's assume you have an agro processing factory that is making box juices. So you're selling box juices every year. You convert your oranges, your grapefruits into juice, and you're selling those. You're getting the money from this. So you're constantly um, refined. You're constantly getting more and more. It is sustained because you can continue for hundreds of years that way because you're making something that people want. People are buying it. You're getting the resources. Now
and and,
compare
and,
that
and
to us.
especially Thomson, when you're the bulk of what you're making is exported, so you have foreign earnings somewhere.
Exactly. So that strengthens your foreign earnings as well. Now compare that with a situation where you are told now, I will give you $800 to go on the roadside and clear the brush on the roadside. Yeah, that where is that $800 coming from? It is coming from a finite pool. It is not a renewable resource. It is not being renewable. It is not sustainable. And that's what we are saying all along. We're saying here it's good to employ people, but employ them in a productive resource, something that can sustain itself, something that can make money over and over and over again. And the government missed the mark. And because they've missed the mark, we are at that point of economic instability. And Simeon asked the question about the housing stock. That is something else, because when housing is usually a very good indicator of the health of the economy. If you have a strong economy, a stable economy, as Simeon pointed out, with different things that he looked at, low unemployment, where you have high or average incomes and so on, and you look at all of the elements of a sustainable economy, housing, people can now be taking loans, going to the bank because they have good, steady incomes. They can go to the bank, borrow from the bank, build. So they're building up the financial sector while at the same time they're building up the housing stock and they're building up our investment stock, if you like. So the country continues to grow over that. Now, when you begin to offer people free homes, it has the impact. Well, firstly, it means that the people who are getting those free homes most likely cannot afford, okay? Because these persons are not working. So already you have a problem there because it means that whatever stock it is that you're building over time, it is going to devalue because it will not be maintained. The persons who are living will not have the resources to maintain it. Government says, well, it's up to you to maintain it. They no longer have the money. It is going to create that problem. But worse, it is going to make the level of stability comes where now, instead of persons now who could afford and who could have gone to the bank to take a loan and sustain the economy in that way, they are no longer doing that because they're getting a free good. All right. So either way you look at it, it works against the kind of economy you want to build. It works against the sustainability of the economy that you want to establish. And that is the problem that we are having. We have a situation where the most of the money, and to make matters worse, in our particular situation, a lot of the monies that were paid to construct those homes, they are all going overseas. Years ago, when there was construction in Dominica, it was being done by our local carpenters or masons or joiners and so on. Local people were getting that monies in their hands to spend within the economy. That is no longer the case. Okay, so we are actually building an economy on sand in Dominica, so to speak. Very shaky. And at the end of the day, what we're going to see is all the elements of instability. The first thing you're going to find very low incomes within the country instead of high incomes. You're going to have very high unemployment instead of the low level of unemployment that you have. You're going to see a situation where everything in the economy begins to go down. Okay, so people's desire to work, even people's wanting to work, the population will continue to shrink because people find it easier to migrate than to stay and suck salt in Dominica. So that is the problem that we have, Sheridan, and until and unless we address it, and I suspect now it might be too late for this government. Quite frankly, I don't believe after 20 years they have the ideas. That is a government that appears to be extremely tired. I heard the Prime Minister in his press conference today sounding extremely tired and wishing that he was somewhere else. That is somebody you could just tell from his whole answers to questions. He's behaving like somebody who wishes that he was somewhere else, but in Dominica, having to deal with the problems that he has to face now. And at the end of the day, our Dominican public deserves better, and we need to demand better. We absolutely need to demand better in Dominica.
Oh, certainly, we certainly have to demand a lot more, and I'll tell you why. Just to add a little something before I go to Simeon, and soon we have to go over to Boston to take some calls, but just to add a little something to that housing situation there, Simeon. I mean, clearly, the way governments operated in the past, before the last 24 years, right, in terms of housing, and you would know, we all know, we saw it, the way it was done. First of all, the economy was more stable because you had farmers exporting stuff, earning foreign exchange so they could build their own homes. You had manufacturers making lots of employing a lot of people and exporting stuff so they could keep on buying raw materials from local sources like coconuts and so on.
Yes,
All
but
right.
just measure the housing transformation in Dominica now,
Right.
versus 70 to 80s, where the farmers of Dominica and the public servants literally transformed the geographical spaces in Dominica. Canefield, Wall House, Castle Comfort, Leopoldville. There are many, Belfast, Canefield East, Mont Daniel. There are many places in Dominica today where the topographical landscape of Dominica was transformed by hard-working Dominicans who were earning a living and being able to go to the bank independently, confidently, and happily take loans and build houses to secure for themselves and their families. One. Secondly, in the rural areas, from Dalis to Portsmouth on the eastern side of Dominica, the people who transformed the housing landscape were the farmers. Woodford Hill, Wesley, Marigot, Calibishi, Cassibruce, Grand Fond, La Plaine. It was the farmers who went and toiled the soil, who could go and sometimes, I remember when I worked in the aid bank, there were farmers who would take a loan of $50,000 this week and come back and bring $25,000 the next week and pay it off. And Mr. Libla at the time would tell us, oh, no, when they were getting their checks from DBGA and Dominica Coconut Products and coconut rehabilitation and all those kind of things there, Mr. Libla would plead with us to ask the farmers to keep the money in the bank, do not pay off the loans. Guys would come in and take their loan for their four-wheel drives in June, and by December it was paid off. That was the reality of Dominicans then, who had the capacity to build their own countries. But you see, in speaking of all of this, and that is why I particularly asked Dr. Thomson about the housing thing, because you see, to compare how that was done, you see, when we think of houses that were built in the past, the difference, you see, is you had a government that was building houses for people. So all the housing efforts in the past were done by governments who were building houses for people. This government is building houses for itself to make a political statement. That's all. They are not building houses to empower, to enhance, and to better people's lives. They are going on these macro housing projects to just build hundreds of houses all over Dominica to make a statement politically that they are building houses not for people, because the people do not have the certificates of title. We have heard statements where by the stroke of a pen I can take it from you. And we have people are being forced to vote for the government if they want the house or want to keep the house. So this is a situation where houses, people are not being housed or getting shelters over their heads for their benefit, but for the political expediency of the government in power. But bear with me, Mr. Gregoire, as we try to focus and stay on track about this political instability thing. Because that's where Dominica is at present, you know. That's where Dominica is at present. And no matter how we want to reform Dominica economically, I'm sure Dr. Thomson will tell you, without political stability, a country does not prosper economically. And all the scholars of political science will tell you, for instance, I know when I was doing my political science and public administration and those things, right? Some of the areas of political instability that have been mentioned is the political instability that shortens the horizon of the policy making of the government. So in other words, there are some political actions that governments can do which will create its own stability and in turn foster the instability of macroeconomic policies, for instance, and the inability for our government to carry through its plans and programs. And so I remember, and they have highlighted three of those things, right? Frequent switch of policies, creating volatility and thus negatively affecting macroeconomic performance. How many times has this government changed policies by the snap of a finger, by the change of an election, by the turn of a wind, or by the movement of a month? Right now, if you are to ask me, what is the government policy on education? I cannot tell you. What's the government policy on health? I cannot tell you. What's the government policy on agriculture? What's the government policy on anything? Because it changes as the world turns, as the wind moves. So if we are to realistically look back on the past 23 years of this government and ask whether they have a continuous, steady policy on anything, they cannot tell you. Not on employment, not in education, not in housing. Another consideration which is often said as creating a certain level of political instability has to do with what they call cabinet changes. That the political scientists will tell you constant and regular political changes in cabinet leads to political instability. And so what have we seen? Election after election, candidates are turned around and shuffled on a draft board many times. Just look at the last 5 years. We've had from between 2014, 2019, 2022, there's not one ministry in Dominica that has had a constant minister. Like in the days of H.L. Christian, who could carry a policy through. Or the days of other ministers, or Dominica had a minister of the only minister in Dominica that has been constant for the past 23 years is the Minister of Finance, who has done a terrible, horrible, ridiculous job as Minister of Finance. We have never had a steady minister in any ministry of Dominica. And the second person following him would be the Attorney General. No wonder we have such a decrepit and incompetent judicial system today. So can you imagine that? The two people who have been the most steady in office have been the most unsuccessful as far as things is concerned. But nonetheless, political scientists and people in politics and governance will tell you, governmental politics and social policy will tell you, stability is created when you have constant cabinet changes, and thereby the ministries in which the ministers occupy does not provide that level of stability. So it creates a certain level of instability. So you see, no matter how you look at it, we are running on a level of instability. Bear with me as I relate that to what you call an anomaly, so to speak, of political instability, but political stability that appears as political instability. I want to refer to Zahid Hussein. He's the lead economist for the World Bank. Dr. Thomson, I don't know if you've ever met him at all. He's one of the leading economists for the World Bank, Zahid Z-H-I-D Hussein. and he writes a lot about political instability and governance, and one of the things that he has written recently about, I'm one of his avid followers because he writes a lot of articles in economic publications and political publications, etc. And that's something, that's a gentleman I'd like to recommend to anybody in politics or governance to follow very closely. Okay, Zahid Hussein is a lead economist in the World Bank. And I want to quote, allow me to quote something from one of his latest articles that I think I read a few months ago. And this is what he had to say. Economic growth and political stability are deeply interconnected. On the one hand, I'm quoting, the uncertainty associated with an unstable political environment may reduce investment and the pace of economic development. That's a given. And he says, on the other hand, poor economic performance may lead to government collapse and political unrest as a means of political instability. But it's interesting to note, in one of his recent articles, he said, as much as we may think that political instability comes from political unrest, he's saying political instability comes from what is perceived as political stability. And this is what he had to say. He says, having political stability can be achieved through oppression or through having a political party in place that does not have to compete to be re-elected. He further went on to say, in these cases, political stability is a double-edged sword. So while the peaceful environment that political stability may offer is a desideratum, it could easily become a breeding ground for cronyism with impunity. Strong words. And he goes on to say further, such is the dilemma that many countries with a fragile political order have come to face. Allow me to quote from him a little more for the purpose of this discussion tonight. Some see political stability as a condition that not only precludes any form of change, but also demoralizes the public. Try to think about that in the context. I don't think this man has ever been to Dominica. And he goes on to say, innovation and ingenuity take a back seat. That's what we see. That's what we see. Many seek change in all sectors of life, politics, business, culture, in order to have a brighter future through better opportunities. Of course, change is always risky. It is necessary. And he goes on to say, political stability can take the form of complacency and stagnation that does not allow competition. Imagine that. And he goes on to say further, just bear with me, the principles of competition do not apply.
I'll give you a minute longer, Simeon.
Yeah, okay. Just so let me just pull out. And he says political stability in this case refers to the lack of real competition for the governing elite, where they see other political systems, education, business, and innovation, and the arts as a competition for themselves. I find that's very remarkable.
You know, very, very interesting. Here's what I would say before I'm going to go back to Dr. Andre for 1 minute, and then we'll take some calls on the console. But here's what I wanted to say, Simeon. First thing, I believe that policies that are driven, that are powered by political expediency, will result in instability. For sure. And that is why when I was president of the DIC, one of the things that we negotiated with Prime Minister Eugenia Charles was that there was to be established a policy review committee. So we met with the cabinet, our executive met with the cabinet from time to time, not to try to formulate policy, but to review some of the policies that the government was putting forward and to ensure that some of the policies they put out were in sync with what we consider to be important, essential, critical for the engine of growth to be able to work. So that is the policy environment that we wanted to create, which is contrary to what we have now. Because if we look at the policy on housing, for example, just to revisit that briefly, what you found happening in those days is that when the government built houses, it was the government engaging local contractors to build those houses. So local contractors, Dominicans were working. You found that these local contractors bought building materials accessories and so on from the local businesses. So the money stayed in Dominica, right? So you could feel that money in the cash register. Your cash register is clinking all over the place. So in fact, that added value. So anything that is natural resource based, which is going into to boost your economy, is great because that is going to linkage you need. Because when you had all these guys who were doing stonework, and a lot of these houses they were built with some stone, and you had pavements with flat stones and so. This means you're adding value to the local resources. Money was staying in the country. But Dr. Andre, I wanted to just go over to you briefly before I ask Bosso to take some calls, because this business of political expediency, which you see, is the order of the day now. I mean, really and truly, if there had been any real policy about the use of the CBI resources, and let us say, I'm going to assume that at least $15 billion passed through this government's hands from 2000 to 2024. I'm going to assume that is at least 15 billion. Shouldn't we be seeing a little bit more of what was done with that on the ground in Dominica? Shouldn't we see a lot more wealth? You know, when people build those houses or the government build them and they pay for them and they pay their loans and so on, and they add a little extra to the house, a room or two. I mean, people who are doing that in Dominica know it costs money, but the point is you're building equity in those houses. So, you know, a few years later, the houses have more value. If you sell them, you have a little bit more money in your pocket, so you can, or you leave something for your kids. Dr. Andre, let's talk about this a little bit more in the context of this whole question of instability in our economy and in our politics.
Well, first of all, in terms of housing, that is just a tip of the iceberg. Bear in mind, a few years ago, when a bridge was being built, a then member of the United Workers' Party said that rather than $18 million to build that bridge, it really cost on about $11 million. He's now sitting comfortably with his new comrades, and he's turned his back to all that righteous indignation that he voiced so many years ago. But he's just one of many. Bear in mind also that you talk about building equity, Mr. G. First of all, the occupants of these homes, they do not own them. They have no certificate of title. And ask the people in the Kalinago territory, if you don't have title, then you can't take loans to develop your farms, to develop any industry or small business that you may wish to develop. That's the problem when you do not own where you live. You may feel good that you're not paying rent. But thirdly, we're talking about building equity. What about the standard? What about the quality of these homes? The Granby people every day are smelling the sweet smell of hibiscus from these Geneva apartments. Go ask the people in Bellevue, Chopin is the same thing. The quality leaves much to be desired. And not only that, but when you put people in apartments, you are changing their quality and way of life. Whether you like it or not, you are divorcing them from their ancestral homes. You're affecting that embryonic tie they had to the soil. You are fundamentally changing the pattern of life of Dominicans, particularly in the hinterland, in the countryside. And that is the problem. We cannot boast about these things. Not only that, but who's building the homes? Thomson has already indicated that this is perpetual alienation. This is perpetual ignoring of Dominican workers. What about the public works department? Huh? They shut them aside so that they can build in their cronies to do the building which the public works department used to do. So what we have is persistent poverty, or a perpetuation of persistent poverty in Dominica. So obviously that will engender instability. A hungry man is an angry man. Who said that? I can't remember. Or as one of our local Calypsonians said, Mr. G, you can't eat concrete, Gasso. You can't. You know? So we can't talk about, quite frankly, governance, the rule of law, development, if you are starving the vast majority of your local population. And those you are not starving, you are alienating. And not only are you alienating, but you are denying them their dignity. You're telling them you can't buy a tin of paint. And you are boasting about 240 million being exported from Dominica. There's no shame. Huh? Compare that to the policies of our predecessors, our leaders, and so on. Edward Oliver LeBlanc telling a Dominican, isn't this your country? How can a foreigner prevent you from going on your own land? People in Bath Estate and all elsewhere getting titles for the properties that they purchased. That is a sense of empowerment because it improves and enhances your dignity as a human being, as a productive citizen, as someone who has aspirations for his or her children, because you can show them what you've worked. And there's no worse way of depriving a man of his dignity than to chuck him on the unemployment line, to separate him from a lands that he can cultivate, to sell some produce, to make him dependent. That is what creates the deep-seated instability. When you remove people's dignity and you render them as as poor people, beggars in their own land. Persons who track, do they still track to the ministry on Wednesdays? I don't know. When you have NEP workers working for a princely sum of $8,000 to $1,000 Eastern Caribbean currency, and to add insult to injury, they have to wait months, but they can't talk loud because they don't want to alienate their gods. So they have to suffer in silence. When you rob people of their dignity, you create an instability. And the question is simple. How long will you or will us or some of us or most of us be aliens in our own land? Beggars looking at persons get rich overnight. And these persons with their ill-gotten cadence are more cocky and they're more arrogant than you will ever be in 10 lifetimes, Mr. G. Adding insult to injury, throwing salt in the wounds of poverty. The question is, what have we done to deserve that? And why do we think that we should maintain or remain in that state and look on as if we become the curse of the land? We deserve better, Mr. G.
Well, thank you so much for that, Dr. Andre. Certainly, I want to go over to Bosso now for us to take some calls. So, Bosso, do us a favor, give the folks the numbers, and let's take some calls. If you don't have calls immediately after you give them the numbers, we'll continue the discussion. And if at all a call comes in at any time, just raise your hand and make me a sign.
Yes, we're going to take some calls. The calls are coming in. They just start coming in. Let's take this call. Hello, good evening.
Yes, sir. I'm going to try to be concise, but I want to reach the people that one of your panel members was talking about. You know, the average Dominican citizen, and I was very impressed with what he was saying. But to keep it concise, there's you can take a cross section of what's happening in Dominica, and it tells practically the whole story. The tables at our local market, right? The local produce market has everything that local Dominicans want to say that they can do. The tomatoes, the cocoy, the fig, the yam. It's there. Agriculture is not dead, but it is not in demand. You go right next door to KFC. The lines are always there. This is the cross-section of what is happening in DA. If you take that little cross-section, it tells you what's happening across the country.
Yeah.
Suzuki all of our imports are redefining who we are too much. And there's an insecurity among our youth. It's not a malaise, it's an insecurity about what exactly it is they're going to stand up for. And we have to re-energize not only the economy, but we have to re-energize the culture of Dominica.
Thank you.
We have to address the fact that how we dress, how we think reflects what we eat. The kind of things that we attend, these things have to become more vibrant. The cell phone has replaced friendship in the you just need a cell phone, and our children are not being socialized anymore.
Okay, Colin.
Except in school.
Yeah, the calls are coming in, so we want to go back to
So,
the panel.
to make it
to wind up, yes.
To make it simple, my brother, right? We have to be Dominicans again before we can, because the times that are coming ahead requires a people who are confident. That they don't need to have the appearance of the foreign world in order to be proud of themselves and what they can accomplish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, let's take this other call, Mr. G. Hello, good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you all doing?
We're doing
Hello?
fine.
Doing okay.
Yeah, I'm calling to ask an important question. This present government, a couple of years ago, they set up a coffee factory in Portsmouth area, in 1 mile. And I noticed this place has been closed down for a long time. They spend, I understand, about $10 million. Venezuela assist Dominica. And what are they doing to assist farmers? Go ahead and plant coffee. These are the questions I am asking.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. We're going to take
All right. Thank you.
We're going to take an overseas call, and Mr. G will take us another call and come back.
Yeah, you take a call if you want anytime, boss, and just let us know.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Bosso.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. Is it okay for me to speak now?
Yes, try to do it brief.
To the panel?
Yes, the panel listening. Try to do it brief.
Okay. Yeah. Well, good evening, gentlemen. I respect each and every one of you on that panel, including Bosso, and I wish Lambi good health.
Great.
But I am concerned about the national constitution. And one man, Darius Liquent, I never met the man, but he has for over a year been trying to introduce this into the conversation as we talk about electoral reform. And he seems to be ignored. So I'm wondering why that is, and if any of you can give me a reason.
Thank you. That's it for you. Thank you very much. Another call.
All right.
Mr. G, well, let's take 1 minute. We're going to come back to you all. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
And how are you?
Good evening, Mr. Boston, and good evening to the panelists, the good gentlemen, Mr. Andrew, Mr. Gregoire, especially Dr. Thomson Fontaine, he's a good man, Yeah, I believe in him. Well, I just want to say tonight, Mr. Skerwood, on the purpose, you need IMF. You proposing all taxes for the Dominican poor people, to tax them rubbish. But tonight I want to propose, the IMF, if you're listening, this guy cabinet is too large. This guy has 22 ministers telling please to cut down the cabinet. This guy, he's traveling a lot, over $100 million in travel allowance for him and his people. government transport all over the place at weekends. All guys traveling and GA everywhere at the expense of the government. Gas next Monday morning, gas on the government. These guys are wicked guys, an evil guy. IMF, this guy, tell him he has, this government is too big. 22 ministers, useless people doing nothing for the country.
Okay.
And they're still in the country money.
Thank you very much. We got the point. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. Gentlemen, you heard the callers.
Yes. Also, if a call comes in anytime, just give me a signal and take the call. Okay, because we have to take the people's calls. Now, just this last caller who has a question about the concerns about the Constitution. As a matter of fact, we've had 3 or 4 programs right on the Global View and Q. Dr. Andre was in it. Many of us were on that. We talked about the Constitution and we made ourselves very clear. And a little earlier on, in fact, I also said that I have a very big concern about our system now because there's too much power in the hands of one man who's not even elected by all of the people. And I've been saying so for a long time. I believe we have to change our system so that the 3 branches of government can truly be independent. That will be the check and balance on the power of that is in one man's hand. The Prime Minister of Dominica has a lot more power than the President of the United States, who cannot sign anything unless it is passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate. So, I mean, but in our case, you have a Prime Minister takes a decision, the cabinet will rubber stamp it, they go to Parliament, they have the majority, that becomes law, and then the DPP who is appointed by them very likely may have to toe the line if necessary, especially when the DPP was not yet appointed. And so many people in the magistracy are not appointed, and many of them on contract. So it seems to me there is so much power in the hands of just one man. That is not what the framers of the Constitution anticipated. I think we need to revisit that. We'll be happy to have another discussion on that again soon. But also, so I will just rely on you to make us a sign if the calls come in. Thomson, I wanted to go back to you because certainly we started talking about the economy and we saw the linkage between the economy and the stability, the political stability. It is a fact. And we can give many examples of that. We see it happening all over the place. I mean, there was a little meeting in Granby on Sunday. I understand the Prime Minister a couple of weeks before that said, okay, well, that was coming up. They said, okay, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have this thing on electoral reform to present to the public. So that means, okay, you guys all have to bother to go up there because in 2 weeks' time we come in anyway. And then the Sunday morning, the Prime Minister is in church in Granby. What I mean, what does that tell you? And then you get a press conference today saying, okay, in the first 2 weeks, so within the first 2 weeks of April. But then he's not saying exactly what is coming out there, He's just saying we will have some elements that we want to take to the Parliament. Not even saying whether it's 10% or 15% or 20% of the reforms that were proposed by people like Dr. Andre and the Electoral Reform Coalition, people like yourself, Dr. Thomson, people like Johnson Boston, and all of the sectors and the church and all these people involved in that process. He's not even saying whether he's going to pass anything that was recommended by Sir Byron, who we paid how many hundreds of thousands of dollars for this thing. Thomson, your thoughts on some of that?
No,
well,
Thomson,
we have been.
Before you go, sorry to disrupt you, but
No worries.
when are we going to realize that there's a punctuation and a precursor to a lie that we need to get accustomed to in the next 2 weeks, in the not too distant future? We know this. Once we hear that in Dominica now, we know that a lie is coming.
Yes, it was interesting because I listened to him very carefully, Prime Minister, very carefully, talking about what is coming, and he said in 2 weeks, but he also mentioned and he hinted at access to DBS radio, he hinted at re-registration, he hinted at voters' ID, because he said, we don't need to go to the Constitution to introduce the voters' ID, and to, I found it to be interesting. It's almost like as if he was saying those things are going to be in the legislation. So let's hope, because we have been asking all along that we need to get a clean voters list. We need to get the voters ID, and we need to get access to DBS radio. And he mentioned all of those three things today. because he did indicate as soon as we go to the parliament that he's going to give the money to the Electoral Commission that they can do the reforms. And of course, the major reform there obviously is the voter ID cards and the re-registration. So now, I mean, we've been hearing this for a long time. We've heard it over and over again. We've not seen it. I will believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I can read the legislation. I will believe it when I'll be able to comment on the legislation. So 2 weeks is not a long time. So let's see. But we really need this, you know. It is very important. And I think the Prime Minister is probably beginning to think of his legacy now, Mr. G, because we've been talking about, you know, what legacy are you going to leave? Because it's not a very good legacy that he has. When you think of the wasted billions of dollars, when you think of the fact that the legacy that we now have is a broken economy, a demoralized population, a depressed population, very high youth unemployment, growing social issues. That is the legacy of the Prime Minister. So probably he's beginning to think now, say, boy, after 20 years, I probably need to have a more positive spin. So hopefully we get electoral reform, because we need electoral reform. We absolutely need electoral reform. And just quickly, the last caller made the point about the big government, and that's a great place to start. If you're looking to cut back on your costs, a great place to start is to cut down on the size. We can do with 10 ministers. We can do with 9, probably even 8 ministers. We do not need 22 ministers in Dominica. In the United States, I think there are 6 or 7 cabinet members, you know, for the entire 350 million people. We do not need 22 ministers in government. That is a huge waste of resources. And that is something that we have to talk about going further. Do we even need 21 constituencies? But that is a change in the constitution. But that is something we have to really look at carefully. Are we just wasting resources on this bloated big government? And that's a great place for the Prime Minister to start making savings.
Let's take a call, Bosom.
Yes. Yeah, we'll take a call. Let's see what happened there. Let's call this. Hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Go right ahead.
Yes, let me just say good evening to the entire panel in short. Yeah, and let me just touch quickly on the reform. I think right about now, you see, when a mango comes out, it is green. Mm-hmm. When it's reaching the ripening stage, it is yellow. So when it reaches to that stage, it cannot come back green. So you see where we are in Dominica. I want the world boss to understand where we are now. The mango cannot come back green. It can only remain in its ripening stage. So that means to say, you beating your chest in such a way that Dominican, all the institution and the organization that run in Dominica belonging to you, that is no more. You had your days, you had your time, you had your season, my boy. And right about now is about respecting the whole vibes, the institutional state, the people of this Commonwealth of Dominica. And let me say this, right about now, you cannot come and disrespecting us, you know, because you see how the economy, you kill it, you destroy your livelihood, you destroy everything around you. You better just be careful how you saying things, how you stating things, what you saying to us, because right about now, we're not going to take no kind of disrespect and foolishness and those kind of turning around and disrespecting us. We are saying we want comprehensive electoral reform for Dominica, for the people, and to respect the rule of law and to respect the institutional state, and that is where we're headed. And you cannot come there and say, hope we accept it. No, it's not the hope we accept it. It's hope it is in the best interest of all of Dominica. Good evening. God bless.
Thank you very much. Mr. G, take it away.
Yes, also. Now, Simeon, a couple of things right here. On 2 matters, I just want to take up right after Thomson and right after a couple of the callers. First of all, the question of cutting back on cost. There's so many areas that can be cut back, in addition to some of those ministries that we have there. Too many people in the cabinet. I mean, you certainly could cut back the allowances that you give to the Prime Minister. is 64 or whatever $1,000 a month. That would make a big difference. It would help pay all the NEP workers instead of sending them home. It would help to pay the public servants instead of cutting back on their wages. Certainly, so there are many areas that can be cut back. But I believe that the Prime Minister, well, since 2008, I believe the famous email, he has been consistently concerned about his legacy. Thomson, it's not something new. He's not thinking of no new legacy. No, it's the same legacy he got in that email there. That is the same legacy he wants to preserve. He don't want to preserve to get a different legacy, It's the same one. Here's what it is. He wants to remain in office and continue to win. And therefore, listen, anybody who believes that any of those matters that he mentioned there is going to come out, the recommendation is going to come out in the manner in which people like Dr. Andre and the Electoral Reform Commission and Boston itself, in the way they've asked for it, anybody who think they're going to get it in that same form are suffering from something. Remember that guy called Douglas? I don't know if you remember him. He said you would have espoir mal papai. His name was Mike. Mike Douglas. Anybody who believes this guy is going to give you any electoral reform that is not going to preserve his winning legacy, we would be suffering from espoir mal papai. Simeon, your thoughts?
Well, the key word you mentioned there, Mr. Gregoire, is legacy. Okay. So if I were to advise the gentleman from a very brotherly way, I would say one has to determine and define for themselves what is the legacy. Do you want to have a winning legacy, or do you want to have a legacy that wins you in the long term? And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Because I mean, legacy is a strongly worded term. Now, I'm glad you're saying that, and I think it is time that, for all intents and purposes, this gentleman seriously considers what is going to be his legacy. Because you may win 20 elections, 50 elections, and at the end of the day, when you lose power, nobody remembers you. And there is nothing on the landscape of the history of Dominica that is going to resonate with anybody to come that while you were in power, this is how you made Dominica better. You see, the houses will age in time, okay? The geothermal might come through and progress through time. The airport might be built, okay? Nobody remembers Mr. Leblanc for building roads or opening Melville Hall Airport. People remember Mr. Leblanc for his philosophical position, his integrity, his personality, and his level of leadership for the country. Mr. Leblanc did many infrastructural things, okay? Nobody remembers Mr. Leblanc for those tangible things that he constructed. What people remember Mr. Leblanc for is for the philosophy that he held, and his legacy is he was a man who brought the rural common folk to a level of a consciousness within themselves that they could be the best Dominican that they can be. That's the legacy of Mr. Leblanc, which resonates through today. Okay? Eugenia Charles has come and done. What do people remember Eugenia Charles for? For her shrewd honesty and her ability to bring a certain level of governance in Dominica that was unsurpassed. She built many things. We hear of the Dame Eugenia Charles Boulevard, but nobody remembers she built it. And so when people have to think of their legacy, they must think of how are people going to remember them, not in so much as the things that they did. So the question that this gentleman has to ask himself now, because it's going to come either through age, either through time, or either through death. No one stays in power for it. And the history of the world's greatest leaders will tell you, Alexander the Great died, Caesar died, Eugenia Charles died, Patrick John died, Rosie Douglas died. His own time will come through. Either he will go physically, he will go through time, or he will go through when he's tired and worn out. And the question is, when he departs that stage, what is he going to be remembered for? by the young people in Dominica? Will he be remembered by the Freedomites as the person who allowed them to pretend that they were labor rights for 23 years under the scheme of a camouflage smoke screen? Is that how he wants to be remembered? Does he want to be remembered by some of his colleagues as the gentleman who allowed them to sustain themselves at the expense of the purse, the public purse, and allow them to aggrandize themselves? Is he going to be remembered? How is he going to be remembered by the young people? Is he going to be remembered like the young man from Calibishi as the man who has destroyed the dreams of young people and Dominican sportsmen? How does he want to be remembered? Or does he want to be remembered as a person who came onto the scene as a bright young star and was able to transition from becoming who he was then to somebody better, and decide, okay, my time has come for me to depart because I have done my duty. Dominica I'm not the end all, and I am not the be all for Dominica. Dominica will exist after him. He's not grounded and rooted in the seat of the prime minister. So he has to go at some point. When he goes, what is his legacy going to be? And I'd like to I always tell people, Sheridan, when I lived at Mont Bruce, and I would spend almost every 5 hours of afternoon at the home of Patrick John at Mont Bruce. I remember all the stalwarts of labor who would come to Mont Bruce before the sun sets, and then Saturdays and Sundays. That's why I used to study for an entrance on the veranda of Patrick John, and for most of my secondary school life, it was either between Oliver Seraphine or Patrick John up at Mont Bruce or at the Pastoral Center. That was my outside school. I remember the people who would come to Mont Bruce and not give Desiree John and Patrick John a chance to breathe. And the day Patrick John left power, all of them disappeared. They had no use for him. They didn't know him. He was sick and he was in bed and he did not exist as far as they are concerned. But I remember the people who would come up there and give him all the advice and allow him to go in a trajectory that maybe, and whether they all disappear, the same thing is going to happen. I want to issue a stark warning tonight to this young man. The very people who today are around him, behind his back, supporting him, encouraging him in what he is doing, the day he comes out of power, there will be nowhere to be found. And so his greatest legacy is going to be as a human being who had the opportunity to lead the government and this country for a period in time. When the time comes for him to leave the stage in whatever way, what would be his footprints in time? What would be the draft that is going to follow him? And I would say a friendly advice and the best advice I could give him, because we all have the doors of life turn for each of us, and that is when I want to talk about legacy. Okay, and so his greatest legacy can be, because as I said, all what he does, and so what is his legacy? Is the legacy going to be the greatest liar, the greatest cheat, or what is his legacy? And that's a very strong word you have mentioned, because when we leave this earth, we all have to be mindful and be conscious of the draft that we have left behind that's going to follow us, or the footprints that people are going to see that we have walked as we transcend into the opaque future of the unknown.
Well, Simeon, here's what I would say. There was a gentleman called Saddam Hussein. He had how many palaces with toilets of gold? And how do we remember him? Remember him lying in a sewer, hiding. That's how we remember him. We don't remember all the palaces and how much gold and diamonds and precious stones were in there. Now, my question is this. how will Nurse Dorival remember him? Because she still cannot get paid the little 2 pence over for her land, the family land in Wesley. How are the Wesley people going to remember him? Is it maybe because the billionaire body, or is it because they still cannot get paid for their land that their parents toiled so hard for, sweat to get? Now they've taken it and they cannot get paid. How are these people going to remember him? Dr. Andre, I don't know to add to some of this here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we have to speculate about these things. I think history will be very tough on those who have enabled this kind of profligacy in public office. People will be very much enraged that we were granted on a platter a unique opportunity to make fundamental changes to improve the standard of living for Dominicans across the board, irrespective of their political affiliation, racial, religion, sexual, whatever it is. And we squandered it while our neighbors made the best of it. If you compare what's happening in St. Kitts in Antigua, in St. Vincent, although Gonzales has nothing to do with the sale of passports, but you will see what they've done with the net proceeds of sale of their passports. They put it to the benefit of their people. And if you look at Dominica today, and you look at the homeowner who hasn't been able to repair his roof, if you look at those who haven't been able to earn a living wage, if you look at those who haven't been able to send their children to school, look at those who sit sometimes in a bedroom crying because they know that their daughter has had to compromise herself, the personal sexual integrity, to get an opportunity to study abroad or even here. They will be scathing in terms of their assessment of any type of legacy that this administration may claim to have. Again, if you're a strong believer of the Holy Book and you read the parable of the sower, you will realize that we have been given certain talents, and quite frankly, we've been expected to make the best of those talents by diligent work. And success is not just measured by how far you've reached in life, the number of degrees you have, the size of your homes, but those you've assisted. When you walk through the portals of success, the doors, success will be measured by the extent to which you've left those doors open rather than shut them to prevent anyone else from coming. So this is a very sad indictment, unfortunately. An indictment which we should be ashamed of. Because again, persons should not be deprived. Their futures and success should not be aborted because they expressed their constitutional right to support whoever they wish to support. And again, in my respectful view, this is not a legacy to be proud of, to talk about. It is a curse that hopefully will illuminate the path to a better future. So I'm not even thinking about legacy insofar as what we have to deal with today of this administration. Because in my view, the word should not even be mentioned in the same breath because of the bitterness, because of what the harm done to persons who have done nothing wrong. Some persons in the public service, and I hope Mr. Leighton is listening, who've given their best, who've strove to be the best they can be, yet they've been passed over. And you know how painful it is, Mr. G, that you've girded yourself to be the best person you can be on the job, only to see some lackey, only to see some sycophant being promoted above you, especially the more so those with egos as big as the Kubrits. You know how debilitating that is. You know how painful that is. You've been nurtured on a diet of working hard, of earning, of being given what you deserve. And yet all those cherished values have been dragged in the gutter. So I'm not even thinking about legacy. I'm thinking about the curse that afflicts Dominica. That's how I see it.
Yeah, well, gentlemen, it's the time has come and gone. It's 10:02, and so this might be a good time for us to start taking some closing remarks. But Thomson, before I did that, I wanted to go to you to see if you had anything you wanted to add to some of those comments that were made, and then I will go to Simeon and yourself and Dr. Andre for some closing remarks after that.
Well, Mr. G, before Dr. Thomson, can I take one call?
Yes, well, if you have a couple calls, take the calls.
Yes. Hello, good evening.
Good night, gentlemen. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, good
I
night.
never thought Dominica governed by an extortionist. Anyone who got rich from extortion and robbery is an extortionist. Our country is in poverty. Women who cannot pay their utility bill, I'm really sorry for them. They will help them in their way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that was the call, not a call now. So I guess go back to you, Mr. J.
All right, so we'll let Dr. Fontaine, let me just go to you. I believe you may have some further comments you want to make before we take the closing remarks. Yeah, you're muted. You need to unmute.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. G. And I guess I can incorporate my closing remarks in there as well. I think I just wanted to probably spend a couple of minutes on the question of legacy, you know, and have people just reflect tonight on where we are after 23, 24 years of Labour Party rule in Dominica. You know, there was a time when Dominica we were really good places in Dominica. Our health systems, our education system, our economy. There was a vibe about Dominica that was real, that was energetic. You know, we used to cut style on St. Lucian's and Vince's, you know. We actually had that time, you know. And now, after those 20 years, we've been beat down. We've been, you know, I mean, we've been put into a situation where we don't even recognize ourselves as Dominicans. You know, this idea of working hard, this motivation to do well, to do good in life, you know, to be someone in society through your own effort. All of that has been set aside, you know, because of what this government has introduced into the minds of people. And you made a very good point, Dr. Andre, about how people feel when they're promoted, when they see others promoted because they support the government. And that's happened in the public service, in the police service in particular. We've seen appointment after appointment to the higher echelons of the police service simply because of the loyalty that people have to this government and not because of their own, and good officers are left to really, you know, go away. So we've changed the mindset of the people. And I know that when we have a new government and when we are able to take this government forward after the electoral reform, it's going to be a difficult task to re-educate people, to get them back into this mood that, you know, you really have to work hard, that it will not be a question of handouts, but everybody working hard, and we have a system that is based on merit, a system where people can, you know, they know that, you know, that if you work hard, you will be rewarded for it. It will not be an account of your allegiance to a party, but on your commitment to the country, on what you put in. You know, that we'll have a merit-based system, that people will be able once again to work, to be able to go to the bank, take the loans, to buy the homes, to build the homes as they want. They will not be subject to a lifelong living of poverty. We want to make that promise to the Dominican public, and we have to get back to that place. We were there before, we can do it again. This last 20 years, and that's why I think now the Prime Minister should start thinking very seriously about what legacy he wants to leave. And the best legacy he can leave now with the time that he has left is electoral reform. Ensure that there is a clean voters list. Ensure that only persons who are legally able to vote can vote or should vote. Ensure that we have access, all parties have access to the radio station. Ensure that there is good finance campaign reforms, and ensure that we have a clean and good election next election. That is the legacy he can leave now, because it's too late for him to build up the economy. It is too late for him to rescue the CBI program. It is too late for him to generate any kind of economic growth in the country. So that would have to be his legacy going forward. And let me just thank you, Mr. G, as well, for the opportunity as well. It's hard to believe that 2 hours have gone by so quickly. It looks like we have just started the conversation. But there are so many issues in Dominica, so much to talk about. But one thing I would like Dominicans to not do is to give up. Okay, we do not want people giving up and throwing their hands in the air, sapu faire. We want people to believe that our better days are ahead of us, that we can do better, that we will do better, that what we are seeing now is going to be very soon be a thing of the past, and that we have a much brighter future ahead. Let us keep hope alive. Let us keep believing that the better days for Dominica are ahead of us. And with that mindset, I believe we can go a lot. We can do a lot, and we can go very, very far with that mindset. God bless you, Dominica.
And thanks a lot, Dr. Fontaine. But because you said this would be your closing remarks as well, let me just hold you for one more second. Beyond electoral reform, even if we were to get the reforms that we want in terms of the right electoral system, I mean, all of the things that we've been asking for, and the campaign finance reform we're asking for, and the regulations that we need, even if we were to get all of that exactly the way that we requested it, which I absolutely doubt that we will get, not from this government in office now. I do not believe we'll get it. Beyond that, election has to take place. We're going to maintain a democracy. Political parties have to organize themselves to win elections, to form a government. You need to win 11 seats right now, 11 constituents with election. So my question is to you, what is it that you can do, or that you are able to do, that you will do, first of all, to unite your party? Secondly, to unite the opposition forces, galvanize and energize the opposition forces. And then, of course, to raise the money that's required, because, these folks you're talking about have deep pockets because they are associated with people with deep pockets. They're going to have money, as we know from past elections. Obviously, the opposition forces under one umbrella are going to require money to compete. Not necessarily as much as they have, but certainly, give me your thoughts on the way forward. In other words, actions that can be taken to ensure that the opposition forces have a reasonable prospect of unseating this government, which I think has been there much too long. 24 years is much too long. I believe in 2 terms, 2 consecutive terms for any administration. What is it that you think can be done on the way forward to get these people out of there and put a new regime that can really put Dominic on the right track?
Yeah, Mr. G, this is a great question, but I will not, divulge all of our secrets now in terms of how we're going to go about raising resources. But let me just assure the Dominican public that is very high on the agenda in terms of getting resources through legal means. We have started various initiatives that we are beginning to run off, and I have every confidence that we will be able to get the resources that we need to be able to take over the reins of office when next elections are held. But that is something that we can only do with the support of the Dominican public. So to me, it is about appealing to the Dominican public. It is about presenting a plan that the people can buy into. It's about presenting a vision for Dominica that incorporates all of us working together collectively to build the country. It's about a vision that puts agriculture first, that puts the people of Dominica first. It's about ensuring that we give the people the assurance that when in office, they will have first go. It will be a country that will look after the interests of Dominicans first and foremost. So if you're talking about the development of small business, if you're talking about the development of the agriculture sector, the services sector, persons working in construction, our truckers, it will be about creating opportunities for the people of Dominica. And with that vision, we'll be able to encourage Dominicans to support that move. Because at the end of the day, it's about people voting. You don't even need a whole lot of money necessarily if people are bought into it, the idea or the vision that you're able to put forward. So it will be one of job creation. It will be one of preserving Dominica in a way that we can encourage Dominicans who are living overseas in their thousands and thousands to come back to the country to help in its development. And it's about creating that space that people will feel that they can speak freely, that they can express themselves freely, that they will not be victimized for not supporting our party, or it's about creating that environment. It's about creating that vibe that I spoke about earlier that people can buy into. So yes, we have a plan on raising the resources to do that. We also have a plan on unifying everybody under one umbrella. Like you, I believe in that. I believe that it's not about one party, but it's about a collection of persons who are like-minded. It's about getting everyone on board, because this job, this task we have ahead of us, Mr. G, it is bigger than any one party. It is bigger than any one person. It has to be a collective effort, and I'm committed to that collective effort. I'm committed towards working together with all persons of like minds. But more importantly, I'm committed towards going out there on the ground, talking to the Dominican public and selling and offering to them a vision of hope, a vision of prosperity, a vision where the young people in Dominica will have a place at the table, and the young people in Dominica will be able to earn wealth and make a healthy and happy living. That is the promise I want to give to the Dominican public, and that is what we'll continue to work on in the weeks and days ahead.
Well, Dr. Thomson, Fontaine, thanks for that. I mean, I have to tell you that I have the absolute confidence that with you and your party and the opposition forces, there is absolutely no doubt that you all would do a much better job in government than what we have now. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We've seen, we can look around and see the results right now. But I mean, the first thing is that yourself and the party and the opposition forces have to get in the government. And only when you're in government that you can do that job that we're talking. And I know that you will do it well. So it seems to me that the opposition forces need to make every effort to ensure that whenever an election is called, that they're ready and that they will win at least 11 seats to form the next government. I see that. Yes, of course. And I see that Simeon may have had some internet issues, so may have dropped off for a while. So I'm hoping that he will rejoin us in a minute. But Dr. Andre, since we do not have Simeon at the moment, I would like to go to you for you to make your final remarks. You need to unmute.
All right. Well, let me say thank you for inviting me to break bread with the rich and famous. Let me thank Bosso for his human service. Let me thank your listeners for staying up this ungodly hour during the week, knowing full well that most of them have to go to work tomorrow, those who have jobs. Let me thank those who dream of a better Dominica. And I think Thomson said it best when he indicated that there's always hope. We have to believe that there is hope. Because, again, as I think it's the MLK Martin Luther King famously said that true crushed earth shall rise again. And some book once said that the stone that the builder refused. And it is wonderful to know that right here in Dominica, irrespective of what's happening, Dominica is blessed with an abundance of riches. When you think about those who have been set aside and ostracized, those doctors who have been deprived of an opportunity to work in their own country, those who have been deprived of an opportunity to ply their craft, whether as contractors, as masons, as carpenters, truck drivers. When you think about those who can make a serious contribution, when you think of the economists like Ken Vital, if I recall correctly, and a few others When you think of those who've been denied an opportunity, irrespective of their talents, Dr. Thomson, Fontaine, to toil in their own country, you must have hope, because you must believe that this state of affairs cannot continue indefinitely. Something has to give. As the Jamaicans say, the bottom of the tub must drop out at some point. Freedom, ability, opportunity will flow like a mighty river, and that stream will swell to the highest level and usher in a new era, a new sense of hope, where the young people can dream of a better life, where there will be no one on the block, so to speak, where everyone will be engaged in meaningful endeavor. We have to dream and we have to believe that that world draweth soon, because within the collective of our talent, we have the hope for personal redemption. We don't need anyone abroad to come and do it for us. We have it within us. And we have to look at this part of our history as just an aberration, a passing cloud, and soon the sky will open and hopefully the sunshine will reign once again supreme. So to those who are listening and to those who share a similar vision of development, of democracy, of the rule of law, let me say to you, sometimes when it appears hope seems distant or non-existent, that is when things start to blossom. And the good thing is, it is the good people of Dominica who will make things blossom and who will build a better Dominica. So with those passing words, I say thank you for inviting me, Mr. G. Thank you to those who've listened, and thank you all.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrew. It looks like we have Simeon back with us live and in living color. So Simeon, it's just time to make your closing remarks.
Well, again, always a pleasure to share with our Dominicans at home and abroad, on issues that are directly affecting us as a people. Good to be on with Dr. both of us tonight. But however, in closing, I'd like to very much end by how I began, because it's something I'm very concerned about, and to say the Dominican people deserve better. Our brothers and sisters across the landscape of Dominica and overseas, we deserve better. We have seen better, and we know we can be better. We can do better. And in order for us to do better and be better, we need that level of stability. We need that level of political and economic stability that is placed within a context of growth, and one that is founded on the rule of law, strong institutions, strong governmental and statutory institutions, and public institutions, rather than powerful individuals. The era and the decade and the epoch of the history of powerful individuals is over. It's over. These were the days of Idi Amin and Saddam Hussein and this kind of people there. And what we need is an efficient bureaucracy. We need an efficient system of governance that can depend on and feel guaranteed that we have a government and a governance system and a bureaucracy that is efficient, that is functioning, that is accountable, where there's no corruption, with an enabling investment business climate. That is what we will have when we talk about having a stable governance, which is crucial to our growth. Okay? And admittedly, the distinction has to be recognized, that governance goes well beyond politics. And politics is part of governance. Governance goes well beyond politics, so that we can go trajectory as we move into 2024. It's still not too late. we talk about electoral reform and change. But at the end of the day, we want a sort of political stability that will lead to economic growth for Dominica, and we can do it. An economic growth that rise in the participation of our labor, where our people produce our goods and services, so that we can have an uptick in production when our people are put to work, when our people are put to produce, when our people are put to work and produce by generating production and manufacturing that comes from our natural resources of our country, where we can discover the new resources of the raw materials that we have and the other resources that are available to us, where we can enjoy an increase in our specialization of labor as a people, so we can gain more human capital. And it would mean that we have improvement in the utilization of the skills of our people, the general knowledge of our people, that our people can produce and get the tools that provide for goods and services that Dominica needs, and a kind of an education reform that takes us into the future, where we can use the new technology that is at our disposal. We can produce the kind of tools and services that can jumpstart our productivity and generate a new kind of entrepreneurship for our country, so we can discover the economic benefits that go with that, and thereby going to the position where we can have an increase in trade, where our people can make money for their goods and their services that is mutually beneficial to the country, where we can have good exchange that will multiply across the entire economy and increase growth and well-being of people. Okay, one that will allow us to reduce all the strangling regulations and barriers that exchange that we are faced with today. So it is within that context, I would want to, as we look forward, I'm happy to know that we have Dr. Fontaine here tonight, and Mr. Andre and Bosso, whom I have a lot of respect for as a man who principles and morals, and one who can say is a steady anchor, has been through all the political weather storms of life, that's very good. So in the midst of all of that, I'd like us to see that we have that stable political environment that is going to generate economic growth, and we can look forward to a bright future for all Dominicans. That's what I'd like to see.
Well, as we go, let me give you the assurance that you would have that level of political stability if, for example, you had three things in place. One would be a fixed date for elections. So nobody can go around saying, I have something in my grandson's back pocket about the day of the election. Secondly,
fixed terms.
Fixed terms, 2 terms, right? Two consecutive terms. That will take away all this instability of all this Zazi Muzai and Coco Maca concern around this thing. Campaign finance reform, legislation in place so you can't go around taking millions of dollars from people with deep pockets, opaque deep pockets, from crooks and criminals sometimes. And then, of course, if as the head of the president of the CCG, I think, said, if we begin to focus more on parliamentary democracy rather than prime ministerial democracies, in other words, take the power from the hands of the prime minister and put it in the hands of the parliament. In other words, ensure that the cabinet is not controlling the parliament, so that all three branches of government can be absolutely independent. It creates a lot of political instability and a lot of uncertainty for the citizens of any country when a cabinet controlled by one person is going to control the parliament and is still going to have a lot of influence over the judiciary. I can assure you, Simeon, that if we were to put all those things in place, we would have a lot more political stability and following of economic stability. And I have no doubts in going, in part, to say that I believe with people like Dr. Thomson Fontaine and his party and the opposition forces were to get into the next government, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the economy would be in much better shape based on what I've been hearing from Dr. Fontaine, knowing that his experiences and hearing from the other members of his team and other members of the Freedom Party and all the opposition forces, there is no doubt in my mind that they'll do a better job than what appears to that we have now. There's a group of people very tired. I think after 24 years, I mean, anybody would be tired of doing. And if you keep doing the same thing the same way every time, you're certainly not going to get a different result. I think Dominicans would like to see a different result. They really feeling the pinch in their pocket, the painful pinch in their pockets now. And I think they would like to see a better living standards, better quality of life, a reduced cost of living. And listen, let nobody fool us. That geothermal thing is not going to reduce the price of electricity for anybody. I'm saying this now on the record. It's not going to reduce the price of electricity for anybody. After you invest all like 100 and something or 200 million just on exploration, and then you haven't even designed your plant, you haven't even built your plant, you haven't even built the transmission lines to power up the houses and so on over very difficult terrain. All these millions and millions going to spend. There's no way you can recover that by making electricity cheaper than it is now. And then secondly, you have put a middleman in there. So this middleman is going to generate electricity. Then he's going to sell it to Domlek, and then Domlek going to sell it to poor people. There is no way that any poor person is going to expect a reduction in the electricity rates. So we've heard the IRC saying that, okay, they have to operate within the regulations and the laws that are set by government, and they have to wait and see how the geothermal thing is going to impact electricity rates, because they're doing a tariff review now. But they cannot come out yet, even if they had a consultation. They cannot come out yet and tell people what the new rates will be, because they have to wait. They wait to see what is the outcome of this geothermal thing. So it'll be interesting to see when the IRC will be able to come and tell the public what the new rates are. And then, of course, based on what the IMF people are suggesting, whether we'll see a VAT being put back on Domlek. So that certainly would increase the cost of electricity. Gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Simeon, his internet has been giving him issues. He's dropped out again. And Thomson, thank you so much for all of the contributions that you've made tonight. And as always, you've been fabulous. Dr. Andre, no doubt. I mean, you've been there consistently and preaching and preaching. I think Dominicans, every Dominican household knows your voice now. Anywhere you go in Dominica, if people didn't even see you and they heard you talk, they would know it's you. I hope they're really listening to all what you have said over the years and you continue to say. Also, thank you so much for standing in for Lambie. I just want to reach out to Lambie again. I'm pretty sure he probably is asleep now, but if he is awake, Lambie, we want you to know that we're thinking about you, and we wish you a very speedy recovery from whatever issues that you have at the moment. So thank you to all our folks on Facebook, on YouTube, and on the platforms, the various platforms around the world. Thank you for personally listening to us on Q95 on our frequencies. And let me just say good night to everybody. It's been great. Hope we can do this again another time. So take care, everybody. Your mic is muted, Dr. Andre, so we're not hearing you. So
good night, boss. So thanks, Mr. G, Dr.
Yes,
Thomson.
Good night.
Mr. Simeon, I can't see him, but good night.
He's dropped off. He's had some internet issues, so it's been unstable. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good night. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Networking Dominica with the rest of the world. The experts are in the house. From Dominica, Canada, the Caribbean.